Well now, are you settled? Good. Let's do our little trick. Let your eyes soften, half open, half dreaming, as the room settles into the quiet around you. You'll find that the longer you try to stay awake, the sooner sleep will come. Let your jaw soften, let your chest rise and fall in an easy, steady rhythm. Let the rest of you grow still, as if the night itself is holding you in place. And if you hear that light tapping at the window pane, best not look. It's only curious when it thinks you're asleep. For now, let tonight's stories begin. In the village of Cong, everyone agreed on 3 things. Mrs. Malloy's bread could stun a cow, the postman knew everyone's business, and Gráinne and Flúthoch was trouble waiting to happen. Not cruel trouble, just the sort that followed her around like a stray dog, loud, stubborn, and forever muddy. On the morning it all began, her mother handed her a bucket. "Down to the well and back," she said. "Straight there now and straight home, no stopping, no wandering, and no getting distracted by daft notions, d'you understand?" "Understood," Gráinne said. She lasted about 10 minutes. On the way back, she saw a patch of briars behind the far field, swaying oddly, though there was hardly any breeze. Something moved inside them, something small and red. She put the bucket down, picked up a long stick, and edged closer. "Hello," she called. A tiny figure burst out of the briars, running full tilt along the stone edge of the field. "For the love of all that's holy, will you stop swinging that feckin' thing?" Gráinne jumped. Instinct did the rest. The stick swung. There was a solid thud, and the tiny figure tumbled off the stone into the thick brown muck along the field's edge. He landed face first, legs in the air, then sank slowly until only his hat and boots were visible. Gráinne stared, and the hat twitched. "Oh no," she whispered. "Please don't be something important." She dropped the stick and hurried over. With 2 hands she lifted him out by the back of his little coat. He was about the size of a milk bottle, dressed in a reddish-brown outfit like a tiny gamekeeper, with a beard the color of autumn leaves and eyes that snapped open in outrage. He was covered in muck from head to toe. "What," he said very calmly, "is wrong with you?" "I'm sorry," Gráinne stammered. "You just burst out on me." "And your first thought," he said, "was to clobber me into muck like a turnip, was it?" "It was an accident." He wiped the muck from his face with both hands and flicked it away in disgust. "Name?" he demanded. "Gráinne," she said. "Well, Gráinne, my name's Flúthoch, proud member of the Dearg. You might know that as the red folk, the ones who keep balance, nudge luck, and make sure the worst gobshites get what's coming to them. And instead of bowing or offering your help, you've planted me in the muck like a turnip." She tried not to laugh. "Dearg, I thought they were meant to be terrifying." "I am terrifying," he snapped. "I'm just having a bad day." "You look more like a really angry carrot," she said. His mouth fell open. "So you hit me with a stick, you dumped me in the muck, and now you insult my dignity?" "You're the one standing in the muck," she said. "Your dignity left you 10 minutes ago." He opened his mouth, shut it again, then winced and held his side. "Oh, great. Bruised. Oh, possibly cracked. Do you know what I was meant to do today?" "Cry in a field?" she offered. He gave her a long, flat look. "No, I have jobs, magical jobs, quiet little tasks that keep your world from tripping over itself. And now I can't do them because some 12-year-old with more energy than aim decided to test her swing on me ribs. She frowned, guilt prickling. Well, what happens if you don't do them? He spread his arms, nearly slipping again. Little things at first. Milk spoils early, a fair man goes unlucky, a bad man goes unpunished. Then storms fall in the wrong place, seas rot, roads wash away, the usual. Gráinne's eyes widened. Are you serious now, or are you taking the mick? Deadly, he said. Well, hopefully not deadly, and yes. You can't just, rest and do them tomorrow. He shook his head, wincing. Magic's like bread dough. It rises when it rises. You miss the right moment, it falls flat. He fixed her with a look. You hurt me, you slowed me down. That makes you responsible. Responsible how? She asked carefully. You, he said, poking her in the forehead with a muddy finger, are going to do me jobs for me. She laughed once, waiting for the punchline, but he didn't laugh. Wait, you're serious, she said again. I am a fairy of balance, he said. We don't joke about work, we joke about, everything else. But I'm a child, she said, and I can't do magic. You can for today, he said. Hold still. Before she could argue, he put his hand flat against her forehead. Heat spread through her head, down her arms, into her hands, not burning, more like someone had poured warm tea into her veins. Her fingertips prickled. She yanked her hands back and saw little golden sparks dance along her nails, fading quickly. Her breath caught. You've gotten to sunset, Flúthoch said. I'm lending you some of my magic. When the sun goes down, the power snaps back to me, and you go back to being a very clumsy mortal. She stared at her hands. Can I try something? She asked. You won't turn my hat into a frog, he warned. She ignored that and pointed at a patch of nettles nearby, concentrating. A soft glow ran from her palm along the air and settled over them. The nettles straightened, shivered, and turned into a neat patch of daisies. Her jaw dropped. Flúthoch allowed himself a tiny smile. All right, he said. You're not completely hopeless. Gráinne grinned, giddy. This is incredible. Don't get carried away now, he said quickly. Magic is for balance, not for showing off to your friends. And the sooner we finish, the sooner I stop smelling like I do. You're limping, though, she said. You're not walking all over the parish like that. Well, I can't fly. I glide a bit, poorly, not after being whacked by some branch-wielding maniac. She held out her school rucksack. Get in. He stared at it as if she'd offered him a coffin. I'm not luggage. You're injured, she said firmly. If you fall again and break something, the whole world collapses and it'll be my fault. So get in. He muttered under his breath, but allowed her to lower him gently into the bag. His head and shoulders stuck out the top, arms propped on the edge. If you tell any other fairy about this, he said, I'll personally make sure you've a lovely green schnot hanging from your nose in front of all the boys you ever liked. As if they'd notice, she said. Now, where to first? He gave her directions with the air of a general commanding a very unreliable army. First stop was Mrs. Malloy's garden. The old woman stood with her hands on her hips, glaring across the hedge at her neighbour's yard. Someone stole her best pegs, Flúthoch whispered. For weeks now she's blamed poor Mary Hanlon next door. Mary Hanlon hasn't so much as looked at the washing line. The real thief needs outing. Do I blast them? Gráinne whispered back. He groaned softly. Why is your first idea always blast? Fine. Will I nudge? Ah, that's better, he said. Right. The pigs are hidden in this garden somewhere, and whoever took them will reveal themselves if he tug the thread of guilt a little. She frowned. How do I tug guilt? Point the 2 fingers, he said. Think about truth, then give the air the smallest flick you can. She pointed towards Mrs. Malloy's hedge and did as he said. A faint golden shimmer ran along the top of the hedge, jumped to a nearby sycamore and settled on a low branch. A moment later, a magpie hopped into sight. 3 of Mrs. Malloy's finest pigs clamped in its beak. It eyed them, eyed the line, then hopped guiltily down and dropped them neatly at her feet before flapping away. Mrs. Malloy blinked. Well now, she murmured, would you look at that? Across the hedge, Mary Hanlon poked her head out the back door. Did you say something, Joyce? I did not, Mrs. Malloy said, and I may owe you an apology. Gráinne bit back a laugh. That felt amazing, she whispered. Flúthoch sniffed. First job done, he said. No windows broken, remarkable improvement. Next, Flúthoch said, we deal with a boy named Sean Og. Gráinne's mouth tightened. What did he do? Flúthoch asked, though he was already watching her face. Funny you should mention him. He took me lunch last week, she said. Said it was a science experiment. Threw it in a barrel of dirty water to see if it floated. Did it float? Flúthoch asked. That's not the point. I'm establishing facts, he said. Did he laugh? Yeah, she muttered. A lot. Does he do that sort of thing often? Yeah, she said again. To everyone. Flúthoch's eyes gleamed. Well then, we are authorized to proceed. They found Sean Og on the green, kicking a ball and bragging loudly about how he had nearly scored for the parish team if the keeper hadn't cheated by catching it. Subtlety, Flúthoch murmured. Think small but sharp, not cruelty, a lesson. So, what exactly? She asked. Yeah, his confidence is in his stride, Flúthoch said. Nibble at that. Not his bones, his pride. She pointed at Sean Og's trousers. Gently, Flúthoch warned. We're not launching him into orbit. Gráinne concentrated, pictured something embarrassing but not harmful, and let a thin ribbon of gold run out. Sean Og took 3 more steps. On the 4th, his trousers dropped straight to his ankles, revealing bright mayo-coloured Y-fronts in full display. The ball rolled away. 2 younger children gasped, then burst into laughter. Sean Og scrambled to yank them up, face burning, and bolted home in absolute disgrace. That was maybe a little mean, she admitted. Flúthoch shrugged. He humiliated you, you humiliated him. He'll live, mission balanced. She sighed. It did feel good, though. I'm relying on that, Flúthoch said. If humans didn't enjoy justice even a little, my entire profession would be pointless. The next stop was at the edge of the bog road outside a small, faded cottage. That's Mr. Cormac's place, Gráinne said. He feeds every stray cat in the county. Half the time he goes without meat so they can have it. Exactly, Flúthoch said. Good-hearted, quiet, never asks for anything. Magic owes him a favour. Well, what does he need? She asked. He'd never say, Flúthoch replied. But look at his boots. They watched from the ditch. Mr. Cormac shuffled out his doors, scattering food for a cluster of thin cats. His boots were patched and split, letting in every bit of damp. Right, Gráinne said. We're fixing that. Flúthoch nodded, approving. Picture what he needs. Simple, useful, built to last. She closed her eyes and imagined a pair of boots, strong leather, dry, warm, with soles that could handle years of bog and rain. Her fingertips tingled. She opened her eyes and traced a small circle in the air. On Cormac's doorstep, a plain brown box appeared, as if it had always been there, no flash, no fanfare, just there. He bent down carefully, picked it up, and opened it. His shoulders straightened. He touched the boots inside like they were made of glass. "Ah, would you look at that?" The cats twined round his legs, purring. "Who sent them?" he murmured. Then he gave a small, private smile. "Well, whoever it was, good luck to them." He carried the box inside. Gráinne let out a breath. "That one felt, different," she said. "Kindness always does," Flúthoch said softly. "I mark the cruel, I answer the petty, but the good ones, they're my favourite work." She glanced back at him. "You're not as cranky as you make out." "Don't start rumours," he said quickly. "I have a reputation." On the way to the last job, they cut across the field behind the school. "Mind where you put your feet," Flúthoch warned. "The farmer spreads more muck here than sense." "I live here," she said. "I know what a field looks like." Her foot hit a hidden stone. The world tipped. The rucksack swung sideways. Flúthoch slid. There was a brief moment where their eyes met in perfect horror, and then he disappeared over her shoulder. She skidded, windmilled her arms, and managed not to fall. When she turned around, Flúthoch was lying face down in a churned-up strip of muck near the ditch. He didn't move. "Oh no," she whispered, heart thudding. "Flúthoch." She picked him up by the shoulders, muck dripping off him in ropes. He coughed and spat out a clump of grass and glared up at her. "Gráinne," he said, voice calm and deadly. "I'm waterlogged, I'm humiliated, and I smell like a cow's hole." Her face went bright red from trying not to burst out laughing. "I'm so sorry," she managed. "You apologize with your mouth," he said, "but your shoulders are shaking." "It's just you looked like a potato someone threw away," she choked. He closed his eyes, counted to 3 under his breath, then opened them again. "I'm injured, exhausted, and now marinated in farm," he said. "And still I'm continuing this mission. That makes me a hero." "You're a very tiny hero," she said. "You're about 2 foot tall yourself," he snapped. "I'm nearly 5 foot. From this angle you're all elbows and knees," he muttered. She smiled and wiped muck gently from his face with the corner of her sleeve. "There," she said. "Less cow's hole, more swamp goblin." "You're not helping," he said, but his mouth twitched. She eased him back into the rucksack, adjusting the straps so he was more secure. "I'll keep you steady this time," she promised. "Cross me heart." "Please don't cross anything," he said. "Just maybe try walking like a person and not a runaway wheelbarrow." By late afternoon, clouds gathered over the forest on the far hill, dark, heavy clouds full of water and restless light. "That's our last job," Flúthoch said quietly. "It looks serious," she said. "It is," he replied. "That storm isn't just weather, it's how the land resets itself, washes old dust away, so to speak. If it falls in the wrong place, the river might burst its banks, roads wash out, houses flood. If it falls over the woods like it's meant to, everything stays steady." "And do you usually steer it?" she asked. "Guide it," he said. "Nudge it. Call it to the right place. But that takes standing under it and holding it in your hands for a little while. And I'm in no condition today to hold anything heavier than my own temper." She swallowed. "So I do it?" "Yes." "And if I mess up?" He poked her in the shoulder. "You won't, not while I'm shouting instructions at the back of your head." "That's comforting," she muttered. They climbed the hill overlooking the forest. The wind picked up, tugging at her hair. The air felt tight, waiting. "Stand there," Flúthoch said. "Feet apart, hands ready. When it breaks, you pull it toward the woods and keep it there." "How do I pull a storm?" she asked. "The same way you move the magpie in the boots," he said. "You invite it. You tell it where it's meant to go. Only this time it's a lot bigger and louder, and if you flinch, everyone gets very wet." "Granso," she said faintly, "no pressure." "You're with me," he said, "so it's only slightly terrifying." She smiled, despite herself. The first low rumble rolled through the clouds. The light dimmed to a strange yellow-grey. Her fingertips prickled again, stronger than before. "Hands up," Flúthoch murmured. "Call it." She lifted her arms, palms out. Warmth surged up from the ground, met the weight pressing down from the sky. For a moment she felt stuck between them like a wire humming between two poles. Her fingers glowed. Thin threads of light reached up from her hands to the base of the clouds, and she gasped. "I've got it," she whispered. "Easy," Flúthoch said. "Steady now. Draw toward the trees." She pictured the forest below, its roots, its thirsty earth, its leaves ready for a wash. The storm leaned. Rain began to fall, slow and heavy at first, directly over the woods. The sound reached them as a steady rush, like 1,000 pages turning at once. "Good girl," Flúthoch said. "Now keep it there." It tugged at her, wanting to spread. Her arms shook. It's trying to slide," she said, through her teeth. "That's what storms do," he said. "Remind it what it's for, not for smashing windows or drowning hens, for cleaning, for feeding, for starting things fresh." She thought of Mr. Cormac and his cats, of Mrs. Malloy and Mrs. Hanlon, of Sean Oak's disgrace, of the way magic had slipped through her hands all day, sharp and bright. "I'm not letting you wreck the place," she told the storm. Her fingers burned, the light between her hands and the clouds brightened. The main weight over the rain stayed over the forest, pouring down in long silver curtains. The wind gusted sideways. She stumbled and caught herself. "Careful," Flúthoch hissed. "Maybe encourage me instead of hissing," she snapped. "You're doing brilliantly," he said at once. "Don't fall over." "That's better," she said. The storm began to ease. The threads of light thinned. Her hands dropped slowly to her sides as the last of it fell in a soft mist over the leaves, and then it was done. The clouds lightened. The air smelled fresh and raw, washed clean. Gráinne sagged, breathing hard. "That," she said, "was the strangest thing I've ever done." "Not bad," Flúthoch said quietly, "for someone who started the day by nearly taking my head off." As they walked back down the hill, the tingling in her fingers faded. When she tried to summon a spark, nothing came. "It's going, I think," she said, a little sadly. "It was never meant to stay," Flúthoch said. "Borrowed power, like borrowing your neighbour's wheelbarrow. Sooner or later it has to roll home." They reached the spot where she'd first whacked him. The muck had begun to crust over at the edges. She set down the rucksack and helped him to climb out. He stood on the stone, still a bit damp, still a bit smelly, but standing straighter than before. "You'll be all right now?" she asked. I'm a fairy," he said. "We bounce, eventually." She hesitated. "Did I actually help? Or did you just spend the day stopping me from destroying the parish?" "A bit of both," he admitted. "But yes, you helped. You put 3 small things right and 1 big thing. That's a good day's work." She smiled. "Will anyone know?" "Not really," he said. "Humans are very good at explaining away miracles. Mrs. Malloy will decide she miscounted her pegs. Mr. Cormac will decide his cousin sent the boots. Sean Oak will decide the ground attacked him personally. Life goes on." "And you?" she asked. "Do you just go back to whatever you were doing before I assaulted you with a stick?" He looked at her for a long moment. "I go back to watching," he said. nudging, grumbling, making sure the worst of you get tripped up at the right moment and the best of you get just enough luck to keep going. He paused. And maybe, he added, I'd check in on the odd pest of a girl who managed not to burn the forest down the first time she touched magic. She tried not to look too pleased. So, I'll see you again. Oh, most certainly, he said, against my better judgment. She laughed. He stepped closer and put a hand on her wrist. A faint warmth moved from her skin to his, like a thread being reeled back in. That's the last of it, he said. All tied off, you're back to being ordinary. I don't feel ordinary, she said. That's because you remember, he said. Most folk don't forget that. He took a step back. Well then, Gráinne and Flúthoch of Cong, ruiner of quiet days and unexpected assistant of the fair Dearg, mind yourself, don't hit any more fairies. I'll try, she said, but no promises. He gave a small bow, as much as his sore side would allow. With that, he climbed up onto the stone wall, walked along it as if it were a road, and just before he reached the briars, he looked back. He gave her a fond smile, then he stepped into the briars and was gone. That evening, as Gráinne carried the bucket in at last, her mother looked up. Where have you been? She asked. That water's an hour late. Sorry, Gráinne said. I got distracted. Her mother studied her, then the bucket, then the far-off sky through the window where the last of the storm clouds were drifting away. Well, she said, whatever kept you, I hope it was worth it. Gráinne smiled to herself. It was, she said. That night, as the village settled and the wind shifted over the briar patch, a small red spark moved among the thorns, and a tiny voice said, very quietly, Right, now where did that disaster of a child leave me dignity? And somewhere, in her sleep, Gráinne laughed. They said the old man and the old dog were never in a hurry. Most mornings, the neighbours in the small village would see them shuffling along the road together. Mick in his flat cap and coat that had seen better winters, and Murchu at his heel, greying muzzle low, paws careful on the gravel. Inside Murchu's head, it was a different story. If he walks any slower, the dog thought, I'll root here and grow moss. That morning was cold and clear. The fire at Mick's hearth had burned down to a bed of orange. He stood for a long moment at the door, hand on the frame, looking out at the thin light. Come on then, lad, he said. We'll go up, the two of us. Haven't been in a few days. Murchu lay by the hearth, his bones humming a slow complaint. We were up there last week, he grumbled silently. There's nothing up there but a hard bench and memories that make you stare. Mick reached for the lead anyway, though he rarely used it now. Murchu pushed himself to his feet with a sigh that came from somewhere in his paws. He didn't want to walk. He wanted the warm patch beside the fire, the smell of old ash and toast, the comfort of the same four walls. But he wanted Mick more, so he shook himself, joints clicking, and padded to the door. Good dogging, Mick said, resting a hand on his head. The touch was light, the skin thin as paper. We'll go see her spot, will we? She'd give out if she thought we'd forgotten her. You never forget her, Murchu thought. You talk to her all day as it is. They stepped out into the morning. The road up out of the village was steep in a slow sort of way, nothing dramatic, just steady climbing that made knees and hips complain. Mick's steps were short and careful. The dog's gait was stiff, back legs dragging a little. They moved together like an old pair of gears that had learned each other's cracks. Every few yards, Murko had to stop and wait for Mick to catch up. He'd walk ahead on instinct, then realize the space between them was empty and turn. Mick would be there, 10 paces back, head dropped, watching his feet. And Jesus, will you make your mind up? Murko thought as they reached the first fork, 2 narrow roads leading left and right between low walls. Mick stood there, looking from one to the other as if he'd never seen them before. One went towards the shop and the post office. The other went up the hill where the church and the small park were. Murko knew which way they always went on mornings like this, so he stood and watched Mick stare, left, right, left again. The dog snorted through his nose. "Oh, we do this every time," he told the hedges. "We only ever go up." At last, Mick nodded to himself and took the right-hand road. "There she is," he said softly, as if he could already see the bench at the top. "That's it there now." Murko rolled his eyes in his head and followed. The fairy watched them from a thorn bush. Its wings weren't glitter or glass. They were thin and pale, like the dry wings of some giant moth, veined and frayed at the tips. Its hair hung long down its back, catching bits of leaf and cobweb. Its face was small and sharp, but its eyes were old, and there was nothing cruel in them. It had watched these two for a long time, the man who talked to empty air, the dog who answered him in silence. The higher they climbed, the more the dog's paws ached. His breath came shorter now than in years past. His chest rose and fell like bellows that had been overused. "Oh, we're nearly there," he told himself. "Bench, view, him talking to the sky. Then we turn and we go home to the fire." "What are you huffing about?" Mick asked aloud, hearing the little sound. Murko looked up at him. "About you dragging me up here when there's a perfectly good rug inside," he thought. "About me hips, about getting old, about you not seeing how tired you are." But he only gave a little wag of his tail and walked on. They reached a bend in the road where a narrow boring cut across, and at that moment something small and fast flickered under Murko's belly. He flinched. A flutter of wings, a streak of pale movement, and the fairy shot from one ditch to the other, low and close, as if it were skimming the earth. For an instant, Murko felt a strange warmth bloom in his chest. Not the warmth of a fire, not even the glow of a full belly. It was like someone had dipped a finger in light and pressed it gently between his ribs. He stopped, ears pricked, eyes wide. Mick glanced down. "What's wrong with you?" he asked. "Come on, we're nearly there." The warmth faded. The dog gave himself a little shake. "Probably the wind," he told himself. "Probably nothin'. Walk on, old lad." The fairy perched on a fence post and watched them go past, its expression unreadable. The bench sat in a small park behind the church, facing out over a sweep of fields and a distant strip of lake. Someone had planted flowers there once, but they had gone wild now, spilling out of their beds in a tangle of stems. On the back of the bench, a small metal plate carried a name and 2 dates: Mairead O'Donnell, beloved wife and mother, always walking ahead. Mick touched the name with 2 fingers as he lowered himself onto the seat. It took him some time. His body didn't bend easily. Murko stood, then circled twice, joints complaining, and laid down at his feet. Mick looked out across the fields. "Morning, girl," he said quietly. "Brought you the dog. He still gives out the whole way up." "And you still talk the whole way up," Murko thought. Some things never change. For a while, neither man nor dog moved. The bench carried the weight of his memories. The dog could feel it in the way Mick's shoulders rounded, in the way his hand rested on the wood, fingers spread. "I tell you, love," Mick said, "it's a lonely house without you." He tries his best, mind. He nodded down at the dog. "He keeps me honest. He brings me out, stares at me when I forget me tea on the table." Somebody has to keep an eye on you, Murchú thought. You'd live on dry biscuits and boiled water if I left you to it. The wind brushed the grass. A crow called from the far side of the park. The fairy sat up in the branches of a bare tree and listened. Mick's voice went lower. "I thought I'd be gone before him," he said. "That was me plan, but here we are, me legs creaking about and him dragging his legs off himself for me every morning." He reached down and let his hand rest on Murchú's back. The dog, who had been composing a long complaint in his head about the state of his joints, went quiet. He turned his head and looked at the bench. "Mary," he thought, surprising himself with the name. "He misses you something fierce." The thought was clear as a bell in his mind. "He talks to you more often than he talks to the priest. He looks for you in every room. When he laughs, he looks to the chair you used to sit in. When he eats, he leaves a bit at the side of the plate like he's saving it for you. He's worn through without you. I'm doing what I can, but I'm only an old dog." He shifted and let out a little sigh. "If you're there anywhere at all, mind him when I can't. He's a good man, the best I've ever known." Mick rubbed his back slowly, thumb moving in small circles. "I don't know what you're thinking, lad," Mick murmured, "but you've a whole world going on behind those eyes." The fairy tilted its head in the tree, listening not just to the man's words, but to the shaped, silent speech in the animal below. The walk home was slower. Mick rose from the bench with care, his knees stiff. Murchú had to push himself upright with a soft groan. "Come on," Mick said. "We'll go down the long way. It's easier on the hill." "It's not easier on anything," Murchú thought. "Everything hurts the same amount no matter what road we take." Still he walked. He walked when his paws hurt. He walked when the cold worked its way into his hips. He walked when Mick stopped to catch his breath and stared off at nothing in particular. Each time Mick paused, the dog went a few steps ahead, stopped and looked back. Mick would smile faintly and say, I'm coming, and shuffle forward again. "If I have to stand here waiting one more time," Murchú thought, "I'll drop on the spot. Come on, man, move those sticks you call legs." But under the grumble, another truth sat like a stone. Don't fall, don't drop, and don't leave me here with no one to walk. By the time they reached the house, the light was shifting. The afternoon had crept away while nobody was looking. Inside, Mick set the kettle, though his hand shook a bit more than usual as he lit the gas. He put out biscuits on a plate, then he forgot about them. Murchú lay by his chair watching. Once or twice the old man seemed to lose the thread of what he was doing. He'd stand in the middle of the room frowning, as if he'd come in looking for something and left the idea at the door. At last he lowered himself into his armchair with a long breath and looked towards the small photograph of Mairead on the mantelpiece. "Well, girl," he said, "I'm worn out today, so I am. That hill's getting higher every year." Murchú rested his head on the old man's foot. Mick's hand dropped, fingers tangling in the dog's fur. "Suppose we'll have an early night," he said softly. The bedroom was small and plain, a narrow bed, a wardrobe, a chair with clothes folded over the back. Mick sat on the edge of the bed, moving slower than ever, and eased himself down under the worn quilt. Murchu settled on the rug by the side, as he always did. The fairy stood in the upper corner of the room, its wings almost still, pressed along its back. It cast no shadow, it made no sound. Mick lay on his back, eyes half open, staring at the ceiling. "Murchu," he said. The dog's ears flicked. "Aye," he thought. The old man smiled faintly. "You're a good dog," he said. "Do you know that?" Murchu sniffed. "You're only saying that now, so I'll feel bad about giving out about you all day," he thought. "It won't work. I'll still give out." Mick's gaze moved slowly to the photo frame on the bedside table, Mairead's face, looking out, smiling at a world that had moved on without her. "Everyone's gone," he murmured. "Brothers, sisters, neighbours, herself. Only you and me now, bye." His eyes shone in the dim light. "If only you could talk to me," he whispered. "Just once. Just to hear a voice that's not me own rattling around in here." He tapped his chest gently. The room didn't shake. The curtains didn't stir. There was no bright light, no sound of bells, only a small, almost unnoticed change. The fairy lifted one thin hand and drew it slowly through the air as if tracing a line. After a long, quiet pause, Murchu thought his words again. "I've been with you since the day you brought me home in that old box. Do you remember? You nearly dropped me on the step. You said, 'Mind him now, Mary, he's all born in trouble.' I've walked every road with you, up hills I hated, in rain that got into me bones, through fields that smelled of muck and grass on your boots. I gave out, and I'll give out again if you ask me to walk tomorrow, but I went every time because you were there. You fed me before yourself when the money was tight. You let me up in the bed that winter you were sick and I thought you'd not see spring. You talked to me like I understand every word, and I do, Mick. I do as best a dog can. I know when you're sad. I know when you're pretending not to be. I know you miss her so much you think your chest will crack. You're the best man I've ever met. You're me whole world. You were never alone, not one day, not while I was beside you. And I don't know what happens when you go, but if there's any way at all, I'll walk with you there too." Silence settled again. The fairy watched. Murchu lowered his head, believing he had only heard those words in his own mind, as usual, and Mick's lips moved. His voice came out quiet, no stronger than a breath, but each word landed like a hand laid on the dog's head. "You walk every road with me," he whispered. "Every single one beside me. A good dog, my best lad." His fingers twitched, searching. It was only then that Murchu understood that the man heard his words. He moved closer, pressing his muzzle to the old man's hand. Mick's eyes drifted towards the photograph of Mairead. "Did you hear that, love?" he murmured. He finally answered back. His chest rose once more, and then went still. Murchu stayed where he was for a long time, nose against the soft skin of Mick's hand, listening for another breath that didn't come. The warmth in his chest eased. His own breathing grew shallower. He curled up on the rug, close enough that his side touched the bed, and let his eyes close. I'm here, he thought, or maybe said aloud. I'll walk with you, Mick, wherever it is. I'm right here. At some point in the quiet of the night, his old heart, that had kept pace with Mick's for so many years, decided it had done enough. Mick and Burchu, the friends who walk together. Biddy McBride heard the baby crying before she saw anything at all. It came from the dark gap beneath the old kitchen press, the narrow space between the warped boards and the flagstone floor, a thin, high wail. It rose and broke, then hit that raw screech that only a baby could make when its lungs were fit to burst. The sound filled the cottage. Biddy sat in her armchair by the hearth, fingers dug into the cloth on the arms. Her old knees were wrapped in a blanket. The fire in front of her burned low and fierce, the only light in the room. She stared at the press. The wail turned into hiccuping sobs, a breath, then another long shriek. "Stop," she whispered. "Please stop now." The baby did not stop. Outside, the wind pushed at the little house on the hill above Dingle. Rain slapped the small window. From the road below, no one would see light. Her shutters were pulled tight. Her world cut down to one room, one chair, one fire, one sound. The sound from under the press. Biddy had been a herb woman since she was a girl. People had walked miles to her door with the pain and fever and fear in their eyes, women with shaking hands, men who could not pass water, children with coughs that rattled in their ribs. She had mixed and poured and sent them away with bottles and teas and powders. Some came back better, others didn't come back at all. The crying climbed higher. It scraped her nerves like nails. "You're not here," she said. Her voice shook. "You're long gone. You've no business here." She didn't move. Her legs wouldn't carry her. Her heart hammered so loud it drowned the wind. The baby sobbed and gasped and let out another broken scream from that low black gap. She squeezed her eyes shut. When she opened them again, the wallpaper was moving. It was old paper, yellowed with years of smoke. The pattern was a tangle of twisting leaves and little round shapes that had always meant nothing to her. Now, in the flicker of the flames, the shapes pulled together. A small, round face looked back at her from the wall by the door. Another face formed beside it, then another. Lines of mouths, holes where eyes should be, then eyes sliding into place, wet-looking eyes, too big for the heads that held them. Their mouths opened. They looked like they were crying, but no sound came from them. The sound still came from under the press. Biddy dragged her stare back to the fire. The flames rose and sank in the grate. For a heartbeat, they were only flames licking along the blackened turf. Then they stiffened. Lines appeared, cheeks, noses, foreheads drawn tight with terror. Dozens of faces pushed forward in the glow. Mouths opened in silent screams. She recognized some of them, a woman who had trusted her with a childbed tea, a man who had drunk a bottle for his chest and never woke again, a youngster who had swallowed a sleep draught and never struggled in his sheets. The flames spat and shifted, and behind those human faces something else peered out, long jaws, crooked teeth, narrow eyes that held no pity at all. Biddy's breath grew hollow. "I did my best," she muttered. I never meant, I... A laugh answered her. It didn't come from the fire. It slid from the dark corners of the room, from behind the press, from up by the rafters. It sounded like an old man and a young girl and a drunk in a lane and a priest at a grave all laughing at once. Her fingers dug deeper into the arms of the chair until the joints in her hands ached. "Leave me be," she said. "Leave me in peace." No one answered. The baby started crying again, sharper than before, as if someone had pinched it. Biddy turned her head a fraction. The faces on the wallpaper had spread. They climbed up the walls, rows and rows of drawn, sagging mouths, some open in soundless howls, some set in a thin, bitter line. The leaves in the pattern had twisted into bony fingers that reached along the plaster, always just short of her chair. The room grew hotter. She lifted her eyes to the ceiling. Something moved up there. At first it was a dark smudge. Then it crawled out over the beam. It had too many joints in its limbs, its elbows bent the wrong way, its knees pushed out at sharp angles as it moved slow and steady across the boards above her head. She couldn't see its face. That was almost worse. Every time it moved, the dust fell in a faint drift like ash from a burnt letter. The baby sobbed again from under the press. Biddy's throat clasped. She remembered that kitchen years ago. Not this one. The other one with the swept floor and the copper pot on the hook. A young woman crying in the doorway, saying the child wouldn't settle, wouldn't stop crying, saying she'd heard Biddy knew her herbs. "Just a pinch," Biddy had said. "In the milk, it'll soothe him, let you sleep." She hadn't watched the young woman measure. She hadn't asked how much a pinch meant in that house. The baby had never cried again after that night. Now the sound under the press rose and broke and rose again, as if that child had been screaming the whole time between, throat never tiring. The laughter came again, closer. Something touched her shoulders. Biddy jerked, but couldn't pull away. A pair of hands rested there, gentle as a friend's. Long fingers curled over her collarbones. They were cold and thin, strong as rope under the skin. They began to knead her muscles, slow and patient. Her mouth filled with bile. She did not dare look back. The hands slid down her upper arms, then returned to her shoulders, pressing a little harder this time, as if working out a knot. She stared at the hearth. The fire spat. One of the faces there, a boy with hair stuck to his skull, opened his mouth wide. This time a sound did come. It wasn't words, not really, just a raw howl that made the glass in the window shake. From outside, the wind answered. The room tilted around her, the rafters seemed too low, the corners seemed too deep, her breath sped up. "Stop it," she whispered. "Stop, for the love of God." The hands left her shoulders, sinking back into the darkness. The baby went quiet. For a moment, there was only the hiss of rain and the crack of burning turf. Then, something heavy slammed into the door. The whole house shook. A beat, another slam, another, as if a crowd were outside throwing their weight at the wood. Voices rose with the blows. Men, women, the young, the old, they called her name. They called her Biddy. They called her herb woman. They called her murderer. She squeezed her eyes shut again. "You came to me," she said, to no one and to everyone. "You begged me to try. You knew it mightn't work. You knew. I only knew what my mother showed me. I only had my hands and my plants and guesswork. I never—" Another slam cut her off. The door frame creaked. The knocker rattled. The wood held. Something moved at the window. She didn't want to look, but her head turned anyway, slow as if some hand had taken a hold of her chin. The little square of glass was dark. Rain streaked down it. For a second, lightning flashed far away, a pale flicker, and in that pale flicker she saw a face pressed against the pane. It was too close to the glass. The nose was flattened, the eyes were wide and stretched, lids pulled back so far she could see whites all the way round. The mouth was a stretched grin as if pulled up by hooks, teeth bared right down to the gums. The face didn't blink. It didn't fog the glass with breath. It just stared in at her, that stretched grin, never shaking. Biddy's heart lurched. She pulled her eyes back to the fire. Her chest hurt. The baby started up again under the press, louder than ever. "Make it stop," she said hoarsely. "Please make it stop. I'm an old woman. I'm no use to anyone. Let me finish out my days quiet." The laugh rolled around the cottage again, bouncing off beams and jars and shelves. Something scraped along the ceiling, slow, dragging scuffs, as if that contorted thing was making another circuit of the room above her head. The patterns and the wallpaper shifted. Faces pulled into screams now, all of them, every single one. Jars began to rattle on the shelves. One toppled. It fell to the floor and smashed, sending dried leaves skittering across the flags. Another followed, and another. Glass shards spread under her chair. The room filled with the sharp, dry smell of cut plants and old dust. A bundle of roots slid from its hook and hit the ground with a soft thud. The baby's crying faltered, then rose again, even higher, as if someone had pinched it harder. Biddy's head pounded. "Stop it," she said. "Stop it, stop it, stop it." The cottage ignored her. From the far corner by the cabinet, something moved in the dark again. The baby's cry turned to a rattling wail, like air being forced through a blocked throat. Little hands slapped the boards under the press. She could hear the skitter of small fingers searching for a way out. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry for you and for the rest. I never meant any of it, I swear it." A whisper slid right under her ear, close enough to chill the damp hairs there. "You should have been careful," it said. "They trusted you." Her whole body flinched. The whisper shifted to the other side. "One pinch," you said. "One pinch. You never watched their hands. You never checked their measure. How many pinches, Biddy? How many spoons? How many babies? Tears stung her eyes. All this time, she said. All these years, why now? Because you're slow now, another voice said from the rafters. Because your hands shake. Because you mix up jars. Because you don't remember what you put there. Because you're close to us. The fire surged bright. All the faces inside it leaned forward as one. The wallpaper heads tipped back and howled without sound. The baby shrieked under the press, breathless and raw. The hands grabbed her shoulders again, harder now. Fingers dug in deep, as if trying to push through the bone. Jars flew from the shelves, some split open. Some stayed whole and rolled in confused circles. Powder puffed into the air, bitter and sharp and sweet by turns. A loud crack split the air as something on the ceiling dropped to the floor and scuttled behind her chair. Biddy let out a thin, keening noise she wouldn't have believed come from her own throat. The cottage spun. Her pulse hammered in her ears. The room seemed too bright and too dark at once. Every shadow moved. Every knot in the wood watched her. The press loomed. The gap beneath it gaped wider, deep and black as a well. The baby's crying tore at the edges of her mind. Enough, she gasped. Enough now, I can't bear it. The hands squeezed once, hard. Then everything reached a pitch she couldn't understand. The fire roared, the faces there writhed like people in a pit. The wallpaper figures leaned toward her, mouths wide. The knocking at the door became a steady pounding like a great flat hand slamming the planks. The baby screamed high and sharp and then dropped to a broken sobbing that shook the whole press. The thing on the floor behind her chair scraped closer. The face at the window pressed harder to the glass until she thought the pane would crack. Biddy McBride clung to the arms of her chair with every last shred of strength. Her tongue felt thick. The air was too thin and too full at the same time. The room shook itself to pieces around her. And then morning came. The cottage looked different in daylight. Green light seeped in through the small window. The rain had eased to a tired drizzle. The low clouds sat heavy over the hill above Dingle. Down the road, a cart rattled past without slowing. Inside, the hearth had gone to ash. No broken jars, no mess. Biddy sat clumped in her chair, head tipped to one side. Her hands hung loose. The blanket had slipped from her knees to the floor. The teacup on the little table beside her was empty, a rim stained brown. No struggle showed in the room, no sign of an intruder, just an old woman in a quiet house with her wrists cut neatly open. The neighbors found her like that. They crossed themselves. They spoke her name soft. One went for the priest. The other stayed, looking around the room with a frown. On the nearest shelf, above the small table, sat 2 jars. They were almost identical, same size, same color, same shape. The handwriting on the labels was cramped and shaky, the ink blotched in places. One jar was marked for her usual evening tea, the one she brewed each night for her nerves, a gentle mix that soothed and settled. The other jar held dried fly agaric, a strong mushroom that country folk knew well enough to be wary of. In small, careless doses, it could send a mind skittering through bright, broken scenes that weren't there at all. The tea jar sat sealed, the fly-agaric jar sat open. She had poured from the wrong one. She had drunk a cup that pulled every guilt and fear she carried out of the dark corners of her mind and hung them on the walls and the ceiling and the sound of the wind. It had turned old mistakes into screaming faces and crying babies. It had taken all the shadows in her house and given them hands. The neighbors would never know exactly what she saw in those last hours. They only knew that when they looked at the shelf and at the empty cup by her chair and at the twin marks on her wrists, that there was only one simple, terrible thing to say. She had taken the wrong jar. When you wake in the morning, please like, subscribe, and leave a little comment below. Your quiet clicks and words are what keep this little corner of the dark alive. The soft echoes that let these stories return night after night. Come back every night. Let this be your resting place. Good night.